What's up, guys? I saw Endgame twice already, and I've just been like keeping up with like some of the articles that are going around, and people are saying that how the Captain America ending is a plot hole, and how other things is a plot hole, and how there are paradoxes, and it's like a lot of people are using the basic time travel rules concepts that we usually see in movies like Back to the Future, as in changing the past affects what happens in the future. Hulk clearly says, or Professor Hulk in the movie clearly says, what happens in the past does not affect the future, because when you travel to the past, you are creating an alternate reality. Therefore, that alternate reality does not affect your future. Now, I'm going to say the present timeline is pretty much the MCU timeline. So if I said the MCU's timeline, I mean pretty much the present timeline. So even Comics Explained, I love Comics Explained. I go to him to just listen to stuff about Infinity War and everything. And now he's saying that there is a paradox in Endgame because of what happens with Thanos, and going back, and Gamora killing Gamora should have meant that Gamora should have disappeared, or Thanos killing Thanos should have meant that Thanos doesn't exist in the future. Again, that is assuming that what happens in the past affects the future. That is not what they set up in this timeline. The rules, again, it is simple. Changing the past does not change the future, because going back into the past creates an alternate timeline that diverges from, well, the MCU's timeline. The past does not, again, the past does not affect the future. It doesn't. Okay? So with the Thanos thing, Thanos from the 2014 comes into the MCU. Again, MCU is the present timeline. Thanos from 2014 comes into MCU's timeline, and he dies. He gets dusted. What that means is that Thanos no longer exists in that 2014 timeline because, well, he died in the MCU's timeline. Now, that doesn't mean that, oh, because Thanos died in 2014, that means that, well, what happens with the MCU, Thanos should not have gotten the stones and the snap should not have happened because Thanos died in that timeline. That is assuming that what happened in the past affects the future. Again, it doesn't. Same thing with Nebula. Nebula shoots Nebula from the past. Again, that's the past Nebula. Does not affect the future Nebula, or even so, that's a different timeline Nebula, so it doesn't affect them. To say what affects the past affects the future is to say that time is kind of like a linear thing, but it doesn't. It diverges into different branches. So I don't know why it's so. I think a lot of people are just overthinking that aspect of the movie. It clearly says it, but I think we just have this preconceived notion that the past affects the future because a lot of time travel movies tells us that. But again, they says that's not how it happens. Now, the biggest plot hole that I see a lot of people talk about is the Captain America thing, as in, how the hell did Captain America, appear old? Like, it makes no sense. How is that possible? That's a big plot hole. It takes me out of the movie. It makes sense. The reason why it makes sense is because, let's just start off by saying Captain America is old as hell. He's from 1940s, right? The first Avenger happened in what, 1940s, and I think Captain America was like 22 years old then, right? Born in 1918, 22 years, and then you go 40s. Then you go to 2000, that's like 70, then 2018, so 90. I guess you can say Captain America is almost like 100 years old, like right now, right? So Captain America, which is officially like 90 something years old in the MCU timeline, at the end of MCU, to return the stones, although I would have loved to seen him meet with Red Skull, he returns all the stones, and what does he do? He stays in the past and he grows old again, and kind of like an alternate kind of timeline, going back and putting the stones where they were originally found. Now that is kind of fishy. That right there, as in putting the stones back to the exact moment. I could see some problems there, but based on what the movie says, I'll go with that. Anyway, so this Captain America, which is like 90 something, returned all the stones, and he actually stays. He doesn't clearly tells you that, but it's implied. He stayed in the past. He has the ring, and he married Peggy Carter, and they grew old together. So Not really sure when Peggy dies, but you'd probably think like maybe 2090s around there. So Captain America, which is like 90 years old already, ages into the future, which is like another again 40 to like 2000. That's like how many years is that? 70 years? I think like 7 years, right? So how old is he? He's like 150 years old. All right, so at that point he's like 150 years old. So obviously he's old. So once Peggy dies, he goes into the past. He lives out his life with Peggy. Once she dies, he puts on the suit and he goes back to the MCU present timeline, back to the day that he would have returned. The same day that he got sent back to return to Stone, he returns there the same day, but he doesn't return like exactly the same time. He kind of returns there a little bit before, and that's why you see him sitting on the bench, because he knew they would be there on that day. He just left that day, so he just goes there, he sits on the bench, he waits for them to do their thing, and he kind of knew they would look over to him, and hey, he's right there sitting on the bench. So Steve didn't change the past. Everything that happened with Captain America's story, you would assume would still happen. The Winter Soldier, all of that will probably still happen. But in no way did Captain America going back into the past have anything to do with the MCU's present timeline. The past does not affect the future. Again, it's an alternative timeline. So if I see one more article, I mean, you can disagree with it all. It's fine. You can disagree. Let me know what you think about it below. That's cool. But based on what the movie says, that's kind of what happened, and it's heavily implied that Captain America went back, lived out his life. He got married. At that point, about the time Peggy died, he's about 150 years old. So that's why he's so frail, because he ages slower than all of us, but he does get older. So he's about 150 years old. That's why he's old. After that point, he returns to the point that right after he left, to return to Stone, sitting on the bench, just waiting for Cap and all of them. And that's why that happened. So it is not a plot hole. It is consistent with the rule that we were given in the film. It's very consistent. What other thing do people... I think some more people might talk about like how Thanos' ship fit through the portal or whatever. Nebula had the pin particles, whatever. They shrunk down the ship, and also they had the time stamp thing. Nebula had the time stamp thing, so that's why none of them turned into babies or anything. So more than likely, she shrunk down the shrimp. She had the shrunk ship in her hand. They have the time stamp thing, so nobody turned into babies or whatever. Time wasn't pushed through you instead of you pushing through time and whatever. Again, and they can't explain every single detail to you in movies. If they explain every single detail, you're gonna have 5.5 hour movies. You have to be able to like get these things from the info you're given. Yeah. So it's not a plot hole. Just remember the rule: what happens in the past doesn't affect the future. Now, are there like instances that I'm not noting right now where there could be some inconsistencies with the rule? Absolutely, but from what I've seen, that those problems that people are like saying exist, or inconsistencies, are not inconsistencies. They're very consistent with the rules that we were given. Anyways, that's just my point on that. On that ending, it's not a plot hole. I think a lot of people just say plot hole. This doesn't make sense. Why doesn't this happen? Just because you might have question about something doesn't mean it's a plot hole. Okay. Anyways, that's just my thoughts on this video. Let me know your thoughts below. What do you think? Is it a plot hole? Let me know in the comment section. Let me know in the comment section below. And if you like what I do, you want to see more, hit that subscribe button and join the ascension. I'm SJ. Thank you guys so much for watching. Later.